I knew I was in trouble the moment I saw her walking up my driveway in those orthopedic wedges and a folder tucked under her arm like it held the nuclear codes. Francine Holloway, the HOA president from hell, was on a mission, and unfortunately, I was her target. "Yorik Nelson," she said, snapping her gum and tossing her over highlighted hair back like she was on a courtroom drama. "We need to talk. HOA emergency meeting tonight, 7 sharp." I leaned on my rake, looking over the dying leaves in my yard. "No thanks," I said. "I've got dinner plans," her eyes narrowed. "Dinner plans? This is mandatory." "Not for me, it's not," I said, turning back to my front porch. "I read the bylaws. Emergency meetings require 48 hours notice unless it involves safety issues, which this doesn't." Francine's jaw dropped. She blinked like I'd spoken Latin. "Excuse me." "You're excused," I said, and shut my door behind me. Now, I'd been on the HOA board for 2 years, mostly because I made the mistake of showing up to a meeting once and they roped me in. But I'd kept my head down, until now. The next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my front door. "Unapproved color of mulch. Fine, $200. I didn't even have mulch, so I did what any reasonable man would do. I checked the HOA's online portal. Not only was there no record of the violation, but there were suddenly 5 more posted under my name overnight. Things like garage door too loud and wind chimes exceed decibel limit. I knew what this was. Retaliation. I printed everything out, every bogus fine, every timestamp, and every rule they violated by filing them. Then I went to the mailbox and saw Francine standing across the street in her driveway, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk with a grudge. "You're violating community peace with that new truck," she called out. "It's a stock Ford," I said, "and it's quieter than your voice right now." She stormed back into her house and slammed the door so hard her Halloween wreath fell off. I didn't bother responding. I had a better plan. That afternoon, I requested an audit of the HOA's financials as a board member. It was my right, and I knew they had to provide access within 5 business days. I also emailed the city clerk for public records on HOA filings, permits, and complaints. That evening, I got a visit. Francine, red-faced and flanked by 2 of her minions, Marla and Judy, stood on my porch as the sun dipped low. She was holding that same folder, only now it was bulging with papers. "You're out of line, Yorik," she hissed. "You're disrupting the board. Declining a meeting isn't disruption." "It's called having a life," I paused. "But you know what is a disruption: fabricating fines, misusing HOA funds, intimidation." Marla blinked. Judy looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Francine's voice cracked slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about." I stepped outside and looked her dead in the eye. "I know you've been writing checks to a consultant that happens to be your nephew. I know you've been altering violation dates, and I'm going to bring it up at the next official board meeting. You know, the one you forgot to schedule." She went pale. "Yorik, please, meeting adjourned," I said, walking back inside and locking the door. She screamed something at the door, but I didn't care. The audit was coming, and Francine Holloway just realized I wasn't bluffing. 3 days after Francine's tantrum on my porch, I got a call from a guy named Darren Kimball. He introduced himself as a forensic accountant, dry voice, sharp mind. I hadn't expected the HOA to outsource an audit, but apparently my request had stirred up more than just cackling hens and clipboard warriors. "I'm reviewing the financials for your HOA," he said, "and I have some questions." I sat up straighter in my chair. "You found something already. Let's just say some of the line items don't pass the smell test." He didn't elaborate, but I didn't need him to. While he dug through the books, I focused on a different angle. I'd filed a formal complaint with the county clerk's office about the HOA's recent violations, and I'd just received a confirmation email that the matter had been assigned to a municipal code enforcement officer named Tasha Elridge. She showed up on a Thursday afternoon, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, and an expression that said she had 0 patience for games. "Mr. Nelson, I'm here about the HOA's regulatory compliance." I led her inside, handed over the binder I'd compiled, and offered her a seat. She flipped through it like a seasoned pro, nodding occasionally, her pen moving fast across her form. Multiple fines issued without hearing notices, Procedural violations, double billing for landscaping. Huh, she muttered. Then she stopped. Wait, this check to J. Holloway Consulting. That name's familiar. That's Francine's nephew, I said. He's 25, dropped out of community college and works at a vape shop. I'm guessing he doesn't provide consulting services. She stared at the page, her jaw tightening. This isn't just mismanagement. This could qualify as fraudulent disbursement of community funds. Is that the polite way of saying embezzlement? Depends how deep it goes, she said. By Saturday, the neighborhood grapevine was vibrating. Francine had gone quiet, no flyers, no front yard announcements, no passive-aggressive sidewalk chalk. But her silence didn't mean surrender. That night, I caught someone trying to unscrew my motion sensor light near the garage. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just stepped outside with my phone and calmly snapped a picture of the guy as he staggered backward. He bolted into the night. The next morning, I sent the photo to Officer Elridge and CC'd Darren Kimball. Minutes later, my doorbell rang. This time, Francine brought backup. A man in a wrinkled suit and scuffed loafers stood beside her, clutching a briefcase like it owed him money. She introduced him as legal counsel for the HOA, but the man looked more like a discount probate attorney than someone you'd bring into a civil matter. We're here to resolve this amicably, Francine said, eyes darting toward my security camera. I think we've all made mistakes. Speak for yourself, I replied. Your nephew's consulting business seems to have billed the association nearly $25,000 last year. That's a lot of advice for someone who couldn't even pass intro to economics. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Nelson, escalating this further could bring unnecessary consequences for the whole community. Like what? Transparency. Francine's hands twisted around each other. You're making a spectacle out of bookkeeping quirks. No one's been harmed. Except the homeowners who paid into the fund expecting it to be used for actual improvements, not to finance your nephew's slush fund or your new patio furniture. The lawyer stepped forward. We're willing to negotiate a cease action agreement if you'll withdraw your audit request and the complaint with the city. I raised an eyebrow. You think I'm dumb enough to sign a gag order while you're under active investigation? He blinked. Francine looked like she'd bitten a lemon. I turned to her. You know, you could have just let the board function normally, but you got greedy. I did what was best for this neighborhood, she snapped. You think you know better because you read a few bylaws and filed some stupid forms? No, I interrupted. I know better because I pay attention, and because I care more about my neighbors than I do about power. She stepped off my porch without another word. The lawyer followed, muttering something about reviewing options. On Monday morning, I got a call from Darren. Yorik, he said, voice tight. You might want to sit down. Lay it on me. The HOA account made a wire transfer last month, $12,000 to a private LLC registered in Nevada. The address is a strip mall in Henderson. No business license, no filings, nothing. My stomach dropped. What's the LLC name? Holloway Property Solutions. I didn't respond. He continued. This is no longer a simple financial review. I've escalated it to the state regulatory board. You'll probably get a visit from a detective. He wasn't wrong. 2 days later, Detective Rachel Mendez from the White Collar Crimes Division of the County Sheriff's Office knocked on my door. She introduced herself, showed her badge, and asked if I'd be willing to provide a statement. I handed her everything, copies of the financials, the emails, the photos, even the footage from my security camera that showed the attempted vandalism. She flipped through the evidence, silent but focused. Then she looked up at me. You've done most of our job for us, she said. If half of this checks out, Miss Holloway's looking at multiple charges. The next board meeting was scheduled for a week later. It was the first official meeting in over 2 months, and word had spread like wildfire. People came out in droves. Lawn chairs, folding tables, even a food truck parked on the street. I wasn't sure if someone had spread the word on social media, but it felt more like a block party than a homeowners meeting. Francine showed up 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and a scarf like she was avoiding paparazzi. No sign of her lawyer this time. When she tried to call the meeting to order, someone from the crowd shouted, "Not your show anymore, Francine." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I stepped up to the front, holding a stack of documents. I'd like to propose a motion, I said. Effective immediately, we vote to dissolve the current board due to gross misconduct, pending the results of ongoing criminal investigations. Someone shouted seconded, and within minutes hands shot up everywhere. Francine's voice trembled. You can't do this. I built this community. I sacrificed for this board. You exploited it, I replied. And now it's time the community takes it back. She looked around, hoping for support, but the crowd stared back, silent and resolute. Then something broke. Francine's shoulders slumped, her lips quivered. And in front of nearly 80 homeowners, she began to cry. It wasn't theatrical, it wasn't strategic. It was the collapse of a woman who'd finally lost her grip on power. I didn't gloat. I didn't say a word. I turned to Officer Elridge, who'd attended at my request as a neutral observer. She nodded. With the board dissolved, the city will appoint an interim committee until new elections are held. In the meantime, we'll be conducting a formal audit and reviewing all financial records going back 3 years. Francine tried to say something, but someone gently led her away. As the crowd dispersed, neighbors came up to thank me. Some shook my hand. Others offered to help rebuild the board. For the first time in years, this place felt like a community again, not because someone was in charge, but because someone had stood up when it counted. The morning after the vote, I found a letter stuck in the frame of my front door. No envelope, no signature, just a folded sheet of printer paper with a single sentence in shaky handwriting. This isn't over. I stared at it for a moment, then slid it into a plastic sleeve and added it to the growing binder of HOA drama now occupying an entire shelf in my home office. By midweek, the city's interim oversight committee had begun its work. They were a group of 3 volunteers from adjacent neighborhoods, no-nonsense types with no ties to anyone in our subdivision. Their job was to manage the HOA's basic functions until we held a formal election. Detective Mendez returned that Thursday afternoon. This time, she wasn't alone. A second officer accompanied her, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing gloves. They quietly entered Francine's house after a brief knock. 20 minutes later, they walked out with 2 file boxes and a desktop computer wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. I watched from across the street, not hiding, just leaning against my fence. Francine wasn't home. Her car was gone, and her front lawn looked untended, no signs of the usual decorative flags or seasonal yard inflatables. The last time anyone had seen her was the night of the board dissolution. Later that day, I received a call from a man named Randall Chu. He introduced himself as an assistant district attorney and explained he'd been assigned to a financial crimes task force recently expanded due to a spike in HOA-related fraud cases across the county. I've gone through your documentation, he said. You've got a solid timeline. It'll help us establish intent. Intent for what, specifically? That's what we're building. So far, we're looking at misappropriation, falsification of records, and possible identity fraud. But there's something else, something we need your help confirming. He paused, then continued. There's a homeowner named Megan Caldwell. She passed away last year. Her account continued making payments to the HOA for 6 months after her death. I frowned. That makes no sense. Her home's been vacant. Exactly. And the deposits were being rerouted through a proxy account. It looks like someone was using her name to pad the budget. You think Francine did it? We're not ready to say who, but the name on the proxy account is J. Holloway. I exhaled slowly. You're going to need more than my spreadsheet. We're already working on subpoenas. But if you hear anything at all, you give me a call. That night, I took a walk through the neighborhood. I'd barely gone a block before I ran into Thomas, the retired Navy mechanic who lived on the corner. He flagged me down, gesturing toward his driveway. You hear the update, he said, his voice low. Which one? Francine's house. Her bank froze her accounts. My cousin works at the branch. Said it flagged unusual spending patterns like $5,000 on a landscaping retainer that never showed up, and monthly withdrawals to a shell cleaning company. There's no license under that name in the state. Sounds like someone was laundering HOA funds through ghost vendors. Exactly. And get this, my security cams caught someone snooping around my shed last night. I think someone's looking for papers they missed during the raid. I nodded. You keep a copy of your HOA dues receipts. Everyone. Good. You might want to hand them over to Detective Mendez. He grunted in affirmation and disappeared into his garage. The next morning, I was woken by a knock, not urgent but deliberate. I opened the door to find a young woman with a shaved head and a messenger bag slung across her shoulder. "Hi, Yorik. I'm Eva. I'm a reporter with Channel 4. I hesitated. "I'm not looking to stir anything up," she said quickly. "But I've been following this HOA situation, and it's not just your neighborhood. There are 6 other communities in the county with similar patterns, same type of shady consulting fees, same forged invoices, same surnames popping up." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "And you think it's connected?" "I know it is. I just can't prove it yet. But I think your HOA was the center hub for something bigger, and Francine, she wasn't acting alone." I didn't say anything right away. She dug into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "Look at this," she said, scrolling through a few screens. "Here's a company called Gable Street Management. It's registered under a different name in each subdivision, but the EIN numbers match. Guess whose address is linked to their P.O. box? Don't tell me. Your old HOA treasurer, guy named Curtis Fenn, disappeared 2 years ago, moved to a consulting job in Arizona." I remembered Curtis. Quiet, always voted with Francine, never spoke during meetings. I'd assumed he was just timid. Eva closed the tablet. "I'm trying to map out the full network, but it looks like funds were being funneled through Gable Street and then redirected to private accounts in multiple states. Your HOA's books are the only ones with enough detail to show the pattern." And just like that, this went from a local scandal to something a lot bigger. That evening, I had dinner with a few other residents in my backyard. Since the shutdown, neighbors had started reconnecting. People who'd barely waved before were now sharing meals, tools, stories. For the first time, there was no fear of fines or anonymous complaints. As we cleared plates, Linda, a nurse who lived 2 doors down, leaned over. I looked up some of the people Francine used as witnesses in past violation hearings. "You know, the ones she claimed had consensus on fines." I nodded. 3 of them. "They moved out over a year ago. One of them died." I sat back. "She forged witness names. Looks that way." I checked with the city. Those hearings weren't even recorded or reported properly. I glanced toward the now dark HOA clubhouse across the street. "She built a whole empire on fake paperwork." "And threats," Linda added. "She made people believe they'd lose their homes if they spoke up." "My husband stopped hanging wind chimes because she told us it was a noise hazard." "Not anymore," I said. "Next month, we elect a real board. No loopholes, no corruption." She smiled, but it was cautious. "If Francine doesn't do something crazy before then." It was a fair concern. The next morning, someone dumped a bag of shredded documents in front of the clubhouse door. The security cameras picked up a silver sedan with tinted windows, but the plates were missing. Detective Mendez was on site within the hour. She collected the bag and reviewed the footage, then pulled me aside. "Based on the timestamps, we think it's Francine, but we can't confirm until we find her. She's on the run, maybe, or maybe she's just hiding. Either way, we're issuing a bench warrant tomorrow if she doesn't appear for her scheduled deposition." That night, I got a call from Randall Chu again. His voice was tighter this time. "We've confirmed identity theft. The proxy account under Megan Caldwell's name was accessed using credentials stolen from a former HOA secretary. Francine used her login to create new homeowner profiles and route funds through them. What happens next? She's facing multiple felony charges. But we're also opening a grand jury investigation into Curtis Fenn and the other names linked to Gable Street Management. This could become federal if the money crossed state lines. Which it did. Exactly. I hung up and stepped onto my porch. The street was quiet, peaceful for now. But the facade had cracked. The fear was gone. And the paper crown Francine wore had finally dissolved under the weight of her own lies. She'd built a little empire of intimidation and fraud, convinced no one would fight back. She was wrong. Because all it took was one declined meeting to bring it all crashing down. 2 days before the HOA elections, I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing a revised set of community bylaws when I got a knock that didn't wait. 3 fast pounds on the front door. I opened it to find Officer Tasha Elridge, hands on her hips, her expression unreadable. "She's in custody," she said before I could ask. I stepped aside to let her in. "Where?" "Portside Marina. She'd rented a cabin under a fake name. Someone recognized her from the news brief and tipped us off. She had 2 duffel bags cash, burner phones, and an entire folder of HOA documents she clearly meant to vanish with." She lowered her voice. "Some of those documents include notarized transfer forms for properties that were never for sale." I sat back down. "You mean she tried to steal homes?" "She already did," Tasha said. "At least 3 elderly residents were convinced to sign maintenance waivers that were actually quitclaim deeds. One passed away shortly after. The other 2 have been relocated to assisted living. Neither knew they'd signed over their homes." I didn't speak for a moment. I couldn't. The air in the room felt heavier somehow, like a storm cloud had finally burst, but instead of rain, it dropped something uglier. "She's being charged with deed fraud, financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, and wire fraud. That's just the start," Tasha continued. "The DA's office is holding a press conference tomorrow." I nodded, but something didn't sit right. "What about the people who helped her?" "Her nephew, the treasurer, anyone who signed off on those transfers. They're next," she said. "The evidence you gave us combined with what we recovered from her cabin maps out a conspiracy. State prosecutors are coordinating with federal investigators now. You just cracked open something way bigger than this neighborhood." That night, I couldn't sleep. I went walking at 2 in the morning. The streets were still, porch lights glowing like quiet sentries. The clubhouse remained locked, its notice board still bearing the interim committee's flyers for the upcoming election. Above it, someone had taped a handwritten sign, "No more secrets, no more fear." I didn't recognize the handwriting, but it wasn't about who wrote it. It was about what we'd become. We were no longer a community ruled by a petty tyrant. We were neighbors again. The morning of the press conference, I stood at the back of the crowd outside the county courthouse, flanked by Thomas and Linda, who'd insisted on coming. The DA, Randall Chu, stepped up to the podium flanked by 2 prosecutors and a federal agent in a dark suit. He didn't bother with legal jargon. He laid it out plainly. "Today, we announce the arrest of Francine Holloway, former president of the Brookmeadow HOA, on 15 felony counts including deed fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and financial elder abuse. These charges stem from an ongoing investigation into the misuse of HOA power structures to commit targeted financial crimes against homeowners." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "Additional warrants have been issued for 5 co-conspirators operating across 3 counties. We believe this was not a case of mismanagement, it was organized exploitation." I watched the cameras flash, and I realized something. This wasn't just a neighborhood story anymore. This was a warning shot to every HOA in the state. The elections happened quietly the next day. No drama, no grandstanding. Just paper ballots collected and counted in the open. I didn't run for office, I didn't need to. My role was done. The new board took shape with people who had been silent for too long now, ready to do things right. 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the county's Office of Community Oversight. It was an official commendation, signed by the mayor and the DA. They thanked me for my persistence and courage in uncovering systemic abuse of authority. There was no plaque, just a certificate, simple, sincere. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the block party we held that same weekend. No permits denied, no fines issued, no HOA board members lurking with clipboards. Just families grilling in front yards, kids running through sprinklers, and neighbors who finally knew one another. Linda brought out a tray of cookies shaped like gavels. Thomas parked his truck halfway up the street and turned up classic rock from his tailgate. Even Tasha Elridge stopped by after her shift, still in uniform, and accepted a paper plate full of ribs. Someone handed me a cold drink and raised their glass. To the guy who told her no. I raised mine in return, to the neighborhood that said no together. The laughter that followed wasn't nervous or uncertain, it was full and free and real. Later that night, as I packed up folding chairs with a few others, Randall Chu stopped by. He looked different outside a courtroom, less stiff, more human. "I thought you'd like to know," he said. The grand jury returned indictments on all 5 of Holloway's associates. And we found the missing funds. Most of it was stashed in crypto wallets her nephew tried to hide under a fake landscaping business. I whistled. How much? Over $700,000. I nearly dropped the chair I was folding. We've already initiated paperwork to have it returned to the affected HOAs. Your community should see full restitution within the year. He extended his hand. I shook it. Most people would have backed down, he said. I've seen attorneys with less backbone than you. I had the advantage, I replied. I didn't care about politics. I just wanted my neighborhood back. He nodded and walked off into the night. The next morning, an unmarked truck arrived at Francine's former house. Movers carried out boxes, furniture, and the last remnants of her life here. The property had been seized under forfeiture laws and would eventually be sold to repay damages. I stood across the street, arms crossed, as the Holloway nameplate was removed from the mailbox. Linda walked up beside me. I heard she tried to blame it on a breakdown, she said. She had one, I replied. But it started the moment someone told her no. A breeze rustled the leaves. The street was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, peaceful, not tense. No more fake violations. No more ghost committees. Just homes and the people who lived in them. As I turned to head back inside, she asked, "You ever think about running for real? On the new board?" I shook my head. "I think I'm better as the guy who reads the fine print and shows up when things go sideways," she laughed. "Well, I hope we never need you like that again." "Me too," I said, "but if we do, I'll be ready." And that was the real victory, not the headlines, not the court cases, not even the restitution. It was knowing that from now on, no one in this neighborhood would ever knock on a door holding a threat in one hand and a folder full of lies in the other thinking they'd win. Because we'd already shown them what happens when you push people too far. We'd shown them what happens when the community fights back.